Dzień dobry, witam Państwa.
Good afternoon. Welcome back, both those of you who are with us in the room and those watching online. Thank you very much for staying with us. We know that 2 full days with plenty of information is a lot of effort, but I hope that we manage to keep you here because we're about to see a very interesting final session where we're going to discuss about politics. But politics in the context of housing. We all need a house, a home, so I hope we'll find common ground. The moderator will be Martyna Obarska from SWPS University. She deals with social campaigns and urban planning as well as architecture. Thank you very much. A very warm welcome. I think I don't need to convince anyone after 2 days of the Housing Forum that the topic of housing is very important. But as usual, we all appreciate concrete steps, concrete information, and that's what I'm going to ask our guests, representatives of parties, to introduce them. The order on the screen is different, but let me introduce Paweł Lisiecki, Law and Justice, Dorota Olko, on the left, Adriana Porowska, Poland 2050, Dariusz Kacprzak, representative of the unaffiliated, Andrzej Domański, Civil Platform, and Krystyna Krzekotowska, Confederation. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we all have in our hands a report that Habitat for Humanity drafted this year. It's about the housing problems and assessment of available solutions. I'd like us to begin our conversation. Well, let's start with the information that the respondents, polls, are to list the 3 biggest pains that they have in relation to the situation of families in Poland. At number 4, we have housing. So it's either a lack of apartments or insufficient standards of housing. So the topic, and this is important because these studies have been repeated many times over the years, and housing crops up on one of the top places. So housing is still an issue. We think about it, it's important for the general public, and very often housing determines our choices in life. So I'd like to ask, and let's start with Paweł Lisiecki. I'd like to answer a question. Ownership or rental? In which direction should housing policy move?
Dziękuję bardzo. To pytanie, odpowiadając na to pytanie, trzeba najpierw
To answer this question, you first have to consider how Poles feel about this, because certain historical circumstances dating back to the 19th centuries prefer to have a small apartment, but an apartment that they are the owner of. Who of you have your own apartment and who's renting If I were to ask that question to you, it might turn out that people who have their own apartment, there's more of you, definitely more in the room than the people who are renting on the free market. There's a group of people who also have municipal housing, social housing.
Uważam, że zgodnie z obecną sytuacją
In line with the
kierujemy
current
kształtu
situation, it's the free market that is determining
własnością, a także i z
issues
najmu
related to
lokalu,
rental and ownership of apartments.
zasada pomocniczości państwa
The principle of subsidiarity of the state influences the situation. First, a given person or a group of people is trying to get a house, an apartment, but where some of the people are not able to afford a house or an apartment, the state supports them through local government or through official government programs.
zwraca się o możliwość chociażby wykupu mieszkań komunalnych. Bardzo duża, właściwie znacząca grupa
I get a lot of people who want to, I get contacted by a lot of people who are living in social housing and would like to buy these apartments as they've been living there for many years. On the other hand, local authorities have to, and the state have to have a certain pool of homes for those people who are not able to afford a flat of their own. And that's the rule that has to be followed. The central government, the certain central authorities and local authorities have to support these people. But it has to be in this order, that first someone has to try and secure their housing needs themselves. If they're not able to do that, they request support of the authorities. For that, you need financing. And here in our electoral program, we specify that we are proposing apartments without deposits. We are proposing streamlining formalities. The program First Apartment, but for those people who don't want to get into any mortgages, we are planning to support social and municipal housing. I was really surprised at how the Warsaw authorities, individual districts, are benefiting from money from the BGK, the National Infrastructure Bank, in terms of renovation of houses, apartments. It's a lot of money that is spent to that purpose. And we even had a conference on the subject. We will go back to discussing social housing later. Let me now understand your party is in favor of ownership. Now, Dorota, I'm not surprised that people in Poland are dreaming of their own apartment or house because there's no other option. If they want to have stability and feel at home at their home, because housing policy in Poland is almost non-existent. If someone wants to live in an apartment for years, you can't really rent this apartment because you may be removed from it. Your contract might be terminated at any time, or you might be surprised with increasing rents. Or the owners might wish to change or sell the apartment or change the situation. So the only option appears to be ownership of apartments or houses. That's why there is this attachment of Poles. We as the left think that people should have a realistic choice, whether they want to buy an apartment or rent an apartment. And at the moment, we don't feel they have this choice for the reasons that I have discussed. At the same time, we think that it is an obligation of the state to provide apartments for long-term lease. And these would be apartments which would be available to a bigger group of people than just those who are not able to secure their housing needs by themselves. Because who is a person who cannot satisfy their housing needs? Are we talking about, young people? Young people, many of them live with their parents. They have no option to live alone with their families or alone or establish a family. Can they satisfy their housing needs? I don't think so. That's why the left thinks that the only solution of the housing problem, a solution that would actually change things in terms of housing policy in Poland, is a great program to build houses by the state in cooperation with local authorities or by local authorities supported by the state. But we need public housing for rental. We would like to see 130,000 apartments built over 4 years, and we're focusing on the Vienna model, where rental homes, either social housing or other options, but they are the default option, and they lower the rental costs on a private market. So in terms of ownership, we think that the state is obliged to make sure that mortgage holders should not be cheated by banks. We need state intervention. We understand that some people treat apartments as security for old age, or they want to pass it on to younger generations. So the state should make sure that this is a safe option. But the key item in our program is to build rental houses with a moderate rental fee.
Usually we have different options and we are going to discuss them if we have time today. The left is opting for long-term tenancy. Adriana. I'm not running into elections. I'm representing the third way today. I took part in development of the housing agenda. This is what I'm going to focus on. So if you're asking me if lease or private ownership, then we opt for lease, long-term lease on safe terms and conditions. We have our political agenda described on our website, and I do agree with Dorota that whenever Poles think of a home, they think of a better place. And if you're renting today, you cannot feel safe. Especially that recent months have shown that rental prices have spiked in Warsaw. I'm managing an NGO, which is assisting people in the crisis of homelessness. And those problems look very differently in big cities like Warsaw, and also in small municipalities, there is a need for very different schemes that would enable people to self-build a home when zoning plans are adapted accordingly, and we need to remember about such people. Our agenda also covers social rental agency. I'm also offering sheltered housing with the help of Warsaw Town Hall. And I know that such community housing is very much needed to people who need more than just a flat. And we should also notice those individuals. So there are differences between large and small cities and municipalities, and also different groups have different needs. Young people, university students. Yesterday, students were protesting about the cost of living in Warsaw. If we want people from small towns not to protest against support provided to people from Ukraine, we cannot have a situation when young people are fighting for a place in the dormitory. But first of all, we need to have money to build dormitories. What will increase the pool of apartments? There are many apartments that are vacant, and we know very well that many people treat apartments as an investment. They are buying apartments in bulk, what takes access to housing away to many people. I've mentioned zoning plans, and there is also an incentive which is very much needed, an incentive for self-government units. And we need funding. We are discussing who should be building more homes, local government units or the central governments. NGOs are trying to launch different activities to pinpoint social groups in need. They are arguing that apartments managed by municipalities which are in dire need of refurbishment, which could be rented by social rental services, for example. And by the way, social rental agencies are a good example that you can be an effective player on the housing market. So we need to think differently. We need to have a long perspective in mind, and we need to assure safe housing. Let me just quote a number of figures to give you additional context. We've just heard, according to the recent census, roughly about 12% of apartments remain vacant in our country. So it's nearly 2 million apartments. So we are talking about not commercial premises, but residential flats. Rental or ownership. I am deputy mayor in the Warsaw borough of Praga Północ, where we are also struggling with community housing. Previously, I was not accountable for housing, so let me present our housing agenda and later comment on your statements. So let me begin saying we want the central government to finance construction of affordable housing with low rent. We also agree that funding from government programs should be allocated to refurbishment of vacant apartments that can be rented. We also want local government units to make contracts with local entrepreneurs to build apartments which could be occupied by people from their waiting list. So not only municipalities, not only social rental agencies, but also private business. And I'm not talking about private equity fund. We have such buildings which were acquired by Swedish investment funds. Those apartments are usually small. The rent is exuberant. I've said that it's not going to be easy because everyone is presenting neatly how they want to improve things on the housing market. So, Pavel, I'll start with you. You had so much time, and housing, I think this is the biggest failure on part of law and justice. You have listed programs that have been put in place, but they are either ineffective or they fail to outreach the target audience. Rental or ownership, on paper, we are owners of our apartments, but you need to keep in mind that the property is in fact owned by the bank, because if you fail with your mortgage, with your mortgage rates, the bank will seize the property. Most Poles have taken mortgage loans. They are not in fact owners of their apartments, and we need to have the right mix. If you can afford to buy the flat, please do it, because it is an investment. There is huge inflation, so you can keep your money safe if you invest it in real estate or even generate a profit after some time. So people who had cash, who didn't have to take out a mortgage loan, they received a very generous return on their investment. In 2021, we had 1.8 million vacant flats, and 5 million Poles are struggling because they have nowhere to live. And rental wise, I disagree that what is a problem is uncertainty of lease or rental agreements. I think that in Poland, the ownership law has been distorted, and I've been discussing it a number of times with Paweł Lisiecki, who is a member of the parliament, and as a result, people are afraid to lease their apartments because they won't want to let tenants in, and other people are struggling with finding a place to live. For example, students who arrive in Warsaw in great numbers in October, very often they are searching for a flat in vain. And a comment to representative of the left: 300,000 flats in several years' time, low rent. How do you want to fund this program? Because my party keeps on reiterating, well, yes, it's a very good idea, but don't put on your plate more than you can eat, because otherwise you will be greatly disappointed during local or parliament or general elections. Private owners who are renting out their flats, they have huge problems with tenants who are behind with rent, who are demolishing flats. There is a very low culture of rental, and I think we should be focusing on improvement, and only then more of those questions would be available on the market, what would partially solve the problem. Okay, so we'll get to more specific questions later. Andrzej Domański. Good afternoon. I would like to thank for invitation. I'm from Warsaw, so I'm very familiar with the city, and responding to your questions. a civic coalition, we believe that freedom of choice comes first. We don't want to tell Poles whether they should take out mortgage loans, lease apartments from private people, or investment funds, or a different institution. The role of politicians is to create a stable, foreseeable framework for any of those options. And I do agree that it's more important to support mortgage with fixed interest rate. But recently, we did not manage to do that in Poland. And we need to create adequate conditions in Poland to increase the supply of flats, what would make prices more stable and would dramatically decrease the dynamics of price hikes. We are probably abusing the term dysfunctional development, but nevertheless, such practices are widespread. No rules apply very often. Both sides, both parties to the transaction are distrustful. Very often, when apartments are rented, people sign the agreement at a notary because they are afraid the other party would violate terms and conditions of contracts, which is why I'm in favor of supporting institutional rental that would be overseen by local government units or private equity at civic platform. We are not against private equity on the housing market. We believe that local government units are key players, but not the only players on this market, because we need equity that will be investing in development of new houses in Poland. But like I've said, supply of land is essential. Without it, there will be no more flats built in our country. We have mentioned subsidies from this National Infrastructure Bank, a bank that was established by my party, which did not receive enough funding this year. It has run out of money, and it's great that Warsaw is benefiting from available funding. So when we win elections on the 15th of October, we will dedicate sufficient funding to support development of cities. Of course, we will be supporting community housing, social housing, which has been mentioned by my colleague from the Third Way, because this type of housing is very important. Naturally, legislation needs to be rounded off, but there is no single choice. There are no clear answers, whether it's rental ownership. I think community housing is as important as other options, because there is no access to housing in Poland. Thank you. And Krystyna Krzakotowska. Confederation, independence, and freedom. For the first time in history, we have an opportunity to have a discussion above divisions, and we have equal treatment of all political parties, what bodes very well for the future parliament. Perhaps all of us will win. There will be no place for hate speech. We will be supporting each other. This is what I hope and wish for. I would like to present very briefly because the topic of today's debate is housing in political agendas. So I would like to ask you to put it in the context of our discussion. So rental or ownership, it's a very important question that you've asked. Well, the fundamental issue is to ensure protection of housing rights. We have different rights, we have different types of ownership which need to be protected. We need to eliminate legal roadblocks that hamper development of housing. Yesterday, I had the pleasure to take part in this very important debate, whose conclusions will be very useful for the future Parliament, and I could be a member of the Parliament or an expert. So rental or ownership, we need to make sure that authorities are not abusing their power in relation to citizens, because that's the root cause of most conflicts, evictions. I can see in this very room people who have been harassed at courts, whose litigation continues for decades. And another very important point related to development of housing and development of ownership, which was prohibited by the past system. Right now, it's celebrated by the civic society. In order to increase even greater chances for development of ownership, Poles in Poland need to collaborate with the Polish expatriate community overseas, which is why we should have 20 seats in the Senate for members of the Polish expatriate community. So I would like to greet all Poles in Poland and overseas who are watching us, because this meeting is being broadcast. And another sad question, we will be claiming compensation for wartime losses. It's a problem that needs to be fixed and resolved above political divisions. So thank you very much. I think the final theme goes beyond the topic of our discussion. So we have touched on a number of issues, and it would be very difficult or even impossible to combine them all. So in my next question, is addressed to people that they opt for ownership rather than for rental. So it's Andrzej Domański and Paweł Lisiecki and Dariusz Kacprzak to a certain degree. So if ownership, we are all aware of current situation on the Polish housing market. Who is the main player? Developers. And it doesn't matter how we evaluate it, whether it's bad or good. This is the status quo. So if we are willing to invest further in ownership, I would like you to tell me what sort of cooperation should be dominating in the future? Dariusz.
Oczywiście
Let me put it this way, developers and banks are key stakeholders in the housing market. But it's also possible for government SPVs to build. We have the Polish Real Estate Holding, and they are a developer too. And they could be a stakeholder in the market who stabilizes prices or even lowers it vis-a-vis developers. It's not about dumping, it's about moderating prices. A publicly owned SPV could work not for profit to provide cheaper housing. Andrzej Domański. I am. You said that you are in favor of choice. That's a key option. It's up to the Poles to decide whether they prefer to rent an apartment or take out a mortgage. And the state, well, private entities, developers, have a role, a significant role to play. And the state should be a tough regulator and enforce the rules. But I would not like the state to become a private-like entity to push out private developers from the market. That's what we see happening in other sectors of the economy where holdings or state-owned companies are pushing out companies from the market. So we need tough regulation and execution. It's up to the Poles to decide whether they want to live in rented housing or they want to buy. Well, we are looking at Warsaw through the prism of the country through the prism of Warsaw, but it's not developers who are building homes. It's Poles building homes for themselves. These are detached houses, single family houses. If we're talking about big cities, there are developers, and developers can afford to do as much as the local authorities enable them to do. So it's up to the local authorities to determine the zoning policy. It's the local authorities who sell land to developers and they can restrict developers. But we have to be aware that later, I'm not in favor of developers, I'm not taking their side, but if there are any restrictions, the restrictions will be reflected in the price of apartments for which people will have to pay. Those who buy apartments are bound by the restrictions imposed by the local authorities. So if we're talking about housing policy vis-a-vis developers, yes, they have to be certain regulations, they have to be tough, but you have to consider that the regulations So do you think that this cooperation with private investors should continue as it is right now, or there should be changes? There should be change. I agree that it's Poles who are building houses for their own money or loan money. In terms of dysfunctional developers, there should be changes. And we have to be aware that any regulations which are introduced then verified by actual situation, and then they have to be amended so that people or developers have to bypass. I think most of us would like to live in a green area. Now a question to Dorota Olko and to Adriana. You are in favor of long-term tenancy. Do you see a role of private investors in that? Since if the situation is what it is right now, if there are such market players, in the long-term vision of long-term rental, what is the role for private investors? Here I'd like to refer to the example of Vienna, where private investors have room, a niche to explore in a pillar where you have moderate profits, and they are the administrators of whatever buildings they build. But in Vienna, a majority of development is carried out by housing cooperatives rather than private developers. But I see a role for private developers in cooperation with the state in this model. We are definitely against co-financing or subsidizing developers or banks by payments to mortgages. I would like to refer to what Andrzej Domański was saying. We were talking about similar values, which are the basis of our programs. Freedom of choice is the key principle. I can't see how subsidizing mortgage loans will reinforce the freedom of choice. They have been introduced by the Law and Justice Party, and they are proposed by the Civic Coalition. We already see very quick price hikes. When the government announced that mortgages would be subsidized, the prices of a square meter in Warsaw skyrocketed even before the start of the program. We're seeing growth of 12% in Warsaw, 15% in Kraków, over 13% in Poznań. So we're in a situation where people who can't afford an apartment will continue not to be able to afford an apartment. So there is no choice that would be available to the people. Even those who are interested in subsidized mortgages will tell you a story about how the price have been skyrocketing ever since they started searching for flats. And the people who did not have credit worthiness with the skyrocketing prices will continue not to be eligible for a mortgage. So subsidizing mortgages does not translate into more choice for people. That's not the way to go. That's not the way to cooperate with investors. And about the issue of regulation. Zoning regulation is needed. We need specific restrictions imposed on developers. I'm appalled by the proposals of Confederation who is proposing to alleviate all rules in terms of architectural and urban planning principles. I don't know how that would contribute to addressing the housing problem in Poland, because it's not that we don't have any apartments built, because there is no freedom to do that. I think regulations are not the problem. Adriana Procka. I said that I've been supporting people in the crisis of homelessness, and over the last 18 years, nothing changed. Developer Plus programs will not help people because people can't afford mortgages. People are not able to get mortgages. If someone feels like and is able to, if someone wants to take out a mortgage for 30 years and pay it off, you're welcome to do that. But I see no reason why we should make it easier to developers and banks signing such contracts. This is not the role of the state. The role of the state in the constitution is supporting people and making sure that people are able to find housing. We have almost 2 million apartments that are vacant, so we should introduce a tax on vacancies. And people who are renting out their flats should be exempt from this tax. Over the last 18 years, I've attended many different meetings at the Ombudsman, for example, and we talked to the people who were feeling let down. They need to be talked to. It's not about inviting them to a meeting, showing them a point in the act that needs to be amended. No, it's about having actual conversations to make sure that all parties can express their views. No government has addressed the housing problems of Poles. After the start of the full-scale war in Ukraine, there is even more demand for flats in Poland and for houses in Poland. It will not be easier for people if we support private developers, if we support such ideas. Because I've not noticed that any of you presented a single 1 point for these 2 million apartments to get on the rental market, to offer security to tenants and owners. We are going to introduce training apartments taken from the free market. People, when they feel safe, when they have support, will be able to find housing. But let's go back to the topic of private entities, private investors. Let's go back to the essence of the question. If long-term lease, long-term tenancies, you've been in this area for 18 years, and you know that the market is what it's like. So what is the role for private sector? Both developers and banks, the private sector in general, can operate in the market, and no one's going to prevent them from doing so. But government money should not support the development of housing using private and supporting private investors. I will pass the floor to Krystyna in a moment. Just a response from Paweł and from Andrzej. Dariusz, apologies. I understand that there is a problem with those who are buying plenty of apartments. I don't like it too. But I would like to defend those who have several apartments for rent, and they're not renting them out because they are afraid of the current regulations that if there is a default on the part of the tenant, they will not be able to use the apartment and they will have to pay for the apartment. Rather than taxing these people, perhaps it's good to consider what is the reason why these apartments are empty, that these apartments are vacant. Because I think rational management of any property focuses on profit. So people will not leave apartments vacant if they can make money, unless they are afraid of the fact that their rights would be violated. Dariusz Katprzak. About what Adriana said, non-aligned local government activists, we think that it's up to the people to decide what they do with their property. And three elements, because you accused us of not saying it, three elements which would help land these apartments on the market. Not all of them, but most of them. First of all, we would seek to introduce insurance of rental transactions. This is happening very slowly, and we need to see more of that. It should apply to all transactions. It's a cost, but it offers safety to all parties. Secondly, we have a mechanism. Someone has criticized here the lack of trust, where we go to a notary, but having a lease contract, a rental contract confirmed by a notary increases the safety of a transaction. And the third element is my personal opinion that if we have something like a source of information about mortgage takers, we might think about some database which would track the record of both parties, the owner and a tenant, so that you don't sign a contract with an uncertain partner. This information, this keeping of the track record could offer some security. And we also need quick eviction proceedings for those who fail to pay their rent. Because at the moment, the situation is that if you don't pay rent, it's very difficult to remove you from an apartment.
Tax on vacant apartments will create a dummy market of dummy rentals. So this is how it's going to end. Dorota Olko. I'm jotting it down. When I was listening to Mr. Lisiecki, I understand why law and justice housing policy looks like it looks like. If we are worried about people who have several apartments and okay, can you stop interrupting me? We are not talking about me. I can answer your questions if you let me finish. So when I hear that we should be taking care of people who want to profit on 5 or 7 apartments they have, I don't know where's the threshold between the evil investor who is buying lots and lots of flats and those who are simply benefiting from 5 apartments. I don't know where you draw the line. I believe that an apartment and we have the right to houses written in our constitution, and it's not a commodity. It should not be used to earn money. Houses are for living. Everyone in Poland should have a place to live and grow a family. So you have asked me, why should you not rent a flat if you have one? So people are reluctant to rent flats because when prices rocket, people who have an empty flat are going to sell it next year and they are going to make a lot of money. This is pure profit. That's why it's profitable. And such people are helped by programs launched and introduced by your party. Okay, so let's focus on the question. Do you know what's the current price hike? In the past 12 months, you are going to earn a lot of money. So you are mainly worried about people who want to generate a profit on apartments. If we focus on people who should be free to profit on apartments, then we will never solve the housing problem in Poland. Andrzej Domański, let's be calm. We need to keep emotions in check. About 2 million vacant apartments, most of them are apartments located in depopulated areas. Even if we bring them back on the market, it's not going to change much. It's not the role of the state to tell senior people who want to keep an apartment vacant for their children so they can move in when they grow up. We can't tell those people what to do. Vacancies we are going to focus on are those apartments which are owned by municipalities, because at least 60% of community houses remain empty, mainly because of very poor technical condition. These apartments are located in large and small towns, and we have a very specific plan. We will earmark 10 billion zlotys for revitalization and refurbishment of such apartments. We are not in favor of putting tax on empty apartments, which are very often located in small towns, and we don't want to interfere with the constitutional right to own a flat. I know that it's very comfortable to say that the market is dominated by super investors who have thousands and thousands of flats. Very often, these are people who have one extra apartment or two. Usually small. If you want to hit them hard, it's not going to solve the problems. I know that you are advocating 300,000 apartments. It's a very ambitious goal, and together we can try to realize it, but let's see what obstacles, what roadblocks can prevent us from realizing it, and let's eliminate them. Let's be realistic. Thank you very much. Krystyna Krzakotowska. Dear panelists and dear guests, we don't want this discussion to be boring, and we can't focus on plans exclusively. Let's focus on our achievements, and only then voters will believe that we can make all promises made before the elections come true. And I think you should make a public pledge whenever you are promising anything, so later we can be held accountable for their execution. So joining us today are mainly parties which have formed governments. There are two parties represented here who had never sinned before because they were not a part of the government. So let's focus and say what we are going to do. We are going to look after the most vulnerable ones, and I'm going to give you examples of how this can be done. Well, we cannot put exuberant taxes on citizens. If our discussion became public, luckily we have journalists in this room, and I hope they are going to publicize issues we have addressed so far. We've mentioned taxes. When housing relief was introduced in Poland, housing was thriving. I myself set up a number of housing corps for judges, for prosecutors, for people working for the justice system. So all professional groups could benefit from that. And they were also making substantial savings, and legislation is not enough. You need effective interpretation of regulations in force, interpretations that favor citizens. When housing relief was introduced, tax officers were often arguing that this relief applied exclusively to natural persons and not businesses.
Że nierówne traktowanie obywateli i osób prawnych.
And I've said it yesterday that unequal treatment of businesses and natural persons was a thing of the past, that we can't have it anymore, and it has changed, and it has stoked development of housing. Okay, we've said just a minute ago that there are proposals to put tax on vacant apartments. So what is the position of your party? I fully agree. With the gentleman sitting at the far end, it's Mr. Lisiecki, Law and Justice. Okay, so I appreciate his contribution to different discussions held above political divisions. So you have rightly noticed that we need to focus on the reasons, but you have failed to diagnose reasons. Yesterday, it was said very clearly that one of the reasons is lack of the rule of law in Poland, lack of access to international knowledge, to legal standards. So the owner of the property and the tenant are both unprotected. Okay, but coming back to my question, should we put tax on vacant apartments? No, absolutely not. If you look at jurisprudence of other countries, for example, in Germany, there is a special school which teaches judges how to announce swift decisions. We need to take a very holistic approach to it. I ultimately agree because you are moderating this debate in a very balanced manner. We'll see to that in a minute. Okay, so I encourage you to come up with questions because I'm sure there will be plenty of questions from the floor. Adrianna Borowska wants to take the floor. Why are people reluctant to rent out apartments? And I would ask why people stop paying rent. Perhaps it's because the cost of living is so high that they start thinking, whether should I do my shopping, or perhaps I should pay for my medication, or should I pay rent? Rental in Warsaw is very costly. Plus, you need to pay the deposit. So, what can we do? Who should take on the accountability? Is it the state? Perhaps we should design a model. When someone is behind with rent, it's the municipality that takes on this responsibility. Because, like we've said, either we have a fast track of eviction, or we are paying the rent for the tenant, because you need to keep in mind that people who are behind with rent are not evil types who've decided to cheat the landlord. There must be a reason. There is also always a reason. I have been running a problem that prevents homelessness, and I know that between you and living on the streets, there are 3 mortgage installment rates. If you think that people who are homeless, and there are 33,000 of them, and I believe the figure is much higher, that those people are sick, dirty, neglected, alcoholics. No, most of them are young and educated. They have tried to make it big in business. These are people who ended up in the street because of us. So this is my point: to prevent homelessness. That's one thing. And secondly, to enable people to have a place to live, no matter if they live in Warsaw or in Giżycka. In Giżycka, you have to pay 7,000 zlotys per meter. Who can afford it? If you worked abroad, you wouldn't be able to pay your mortgage anyway. Dariusz Kacprzak. Okay, a very brief comment. Yes, it's true that on average in Poland you have to work double to pay for 1 square meter of your apartment. And Ms. Krzakotowska has asked us to blow our trumpets. So thanks to funding from the central budget and our municipal budget, we are building community housing for 72 families. So we are able to do that. It took us 12 months to build that building, and I believe that housing should be provided by municipalities, because we know where to build, what should be built, and there are government programs that make funding available. There is my colleague from the town hall who's also changing the district, and local government units are working hard to change things for better. You have mentioned poor residents who cannot afford to pay the rent. I will give you the example of my neighborhood. Debts per capita, total debts are 100 million zlotys. Just think how many apartments you can build with this money. And yes, some of them have failed. Life didn't work out as it should, but if you want to turn your life around, you deserve support. And it's great that we have subsidies, rent subsidies, that we are helping people to transition out of homelessness. But there are also residents who are simply lazy. They believe that they will be living at the expense of others. Let me describe an example. I was visited by a man who wanted to swap apartments, and I said, "Look, but you are behind with 100,000 zlotys in rent." And he said, "Look, I'm not paying rent. My father was not paying rent. My grandfather was not paying rent, and my son will be not paying rent. So, should we be helping such people who are living at other person's expense?" So I understand that you disagree. Okay, so my question is, what should we do with those people? Because not helping comes at a cost. Paweł Lisiecki. There was an idea also from the same neighborhood, housing coupons. For example, in Warsaw, you have to wait years and years for a community home. So you can get housing voucher. So until you get your council flat, you could have funding to rent an apartment on the free market, and probably we would fill all vacant flats. Tax on vacant flats. The state or regulations should not make any difference between vacant apartments owned by private individuals and municipalities, which own most vacant apartments in Poland. And to comment on the left's view of ownership. When I looked at tax declarations of all candidates, they had several apartments each. Well, this is how it is. There was one MP who had 3 or 4 apartments, but I think Law and Justice has the biggest number of millionaires.
Wracajmy po pierwsze, raczej jeśli podajemy takie
But if we're giving this information, we should be very specific. Dorota, Olko, I think talking about specific people is not the right approach. If we can continue talking about general issues, Dorota. You have mentioned the MP who owns several flats. Perhaps he would be happy to pay higher taxes. About homelessness, let Dorota finish. I have raised my hand, Christina, and waited for my turn. Yes, the tax on vacant flats. I looked it up. It's in the program of New Left, of our electoral coalition. I support it, the Razem party supports it, and I don't understand how it's unconstitutional.
Dlatego jesteśmy za tym, żeby zapobiegać przemocy domowej również.
If we can continue about housing. So I don't see how this tax is unconstitutional, how it infringes on private property rights. But vacant apartments are not the only problem. And the left has it in its program. We want to address the issue of supporting long-term rent rather than short-term rentals. We've already seen that happen in other cities in Europe, changing structure of rentals. In city centers, native populations have been pushed out in favor of short-term rentals to tourists. That's not the only problem. Another problem is the fact that the apartments that are rented short-term are a nuisance to other inhabitants of the building because they are rented for parties, stag nights, hen nights, and that's not what apartments are built. Apartments in residential buildings are not built to be used as hotel apartments. So you would like to limit short-term rentals, which is not regulated by the Polish law at the moment. It's up to local authorities. I disagree with the non-aligned mayor of Praga Północ in Warsaw. Homelessness in Poland is a problem to which local authorities are contributing rather than addressing it. In Germany, when a tenant is unable to pay their dues, they're not being evicted, but the municipality will pay the rent so that the private owner would not have to support the tenant. And this offers safety and security to both parties, but we cannot afford that. That's what is being said. But this way of preventing homelessness is cheaper than addressing the problem of actual homelessness. It takes a lot of effort to help someone who is homeless. So it's better to prevent homelessness than try to end it in specific cases of specific people. I see some surprising coalitions being struck at this table. We agreed that I can address what Christina said. In my district, we have social assistance, and when people are behind with payment and you don't evict people, you try to give them temporary housing. And when someone has problems, I send social workers to check why a family is not able to pay rent. And that's the key thing that we do. We investigate what the problem is, and only once we know, we decide what to do with a specific case. So it's not that when someone is behind in rent, they are immediately evicted. Local authorities have to balance various factors that influence the situation of individuals or families. Very good that you said that, but the right of citizens to information is not observed. So people have the right to information, and my many years of experience suggests that people are not aware of their rights. Even lawyers are not taught how to settle amicably difficult cases. I represented many people, and I wanted to make sure that the mayor of Warsaw helps people rather than evicts them. So thank you very much for what you said. We can change it together, right? I can see that the lady from Confederacja is enforcing the rule that the one who has a microphone rules. Now, I'd like to get back to the discussion. I'd like to express more precisely what our position is. We are against taxing vacant flats. This would be very difficult to enforce for operational reasons. Who is going to check if my apartment is inhabited, it's vacant, or what I'm doing with it? It's very difficult to check that. I might have a number of children. How can you check whether my children are living in that apartment or not? Who's going to walk around and check who is paying for energy, etc.? We don't want the state to go too far. We want an efficient state. We don't want to have any penal taxes, even if someone is buying an apartment for investment reasons. Now, briefly about what is a deficiency of our state in housing. The fact that savings of more affluent Poles are invested in the housing market. That's one of the reasons why prices of apartments are going up. People are investing in apartments as property, and that's a difference between Poland and other developed countries. Less affluent Poles have been hurt by the changes in the prices of apartments. To benefit, you have to have money. You have to have 500,000 zlotys in savings, and then you can buy an apartment and make money on that, wait for prices to rise. People who don't have that kind of money have not benefited from the rising prices in the housing market. We already have funds which are operating in the Polish market. Canadian, Swedish, American, Australian pensioners will benefit from the investment of those funds. So now there's a question, why Poles who have 10, 20 or 30,000 zlotys in savings cannot get access to this opportunity of saving and investing this amount of money in the property market? We know that there is a solution for that. The only argument against the implementation of this solution is that it has the word funds. And what I mean is REITs. We have to be frank about it. We need to discuss it. I think it's a great forum to have this discussion. But since I finally have the microphone, and thank you very much for that, I would also like to discuss the issue of rental. That's what we started from. We need to talk about how to structure long-term rentals. What about the support of local governments? What about social rental agencies? I hope that we all support this development. The asymmetry of information is destabilizing the market. The lack of trust is a problem. That's why people are going to notaries, and no one treats apartments that are rented as their own. Neither the owners, because they're renting these apartments out, and nor do the tenants, because it doesn't belong to them. So they will not look after the apartments. So we need to make sure that rentals are safe and are long-term. So we need to address the risk that a rental contract is terminated overnight. To enhance rental safety, we need more involvement of local authorities. When the rental market is only controlled by individuals who can terminate contracts, there is much less trust, much less confidence in the market. Thank you very much. Dorota Olko, and we have to talk about the construction of new buildings and about the stocks that we currently have. Well, I started with supporting long-term rental. I agree that rather than introducing a tax on vacancies, it would be better to introduce a tax on having several apartments. But I understand that's too radical for the civic coalition. Yes, we would be against that. So we are clear in terms of our positions. We are treating apartments and houses as commodity. As in, if that is the case, then we're not treating it as something that satisfies a very basic need for a place to live. That's why there are differences between us. And I would like housing to be something more than a part of financial instruments, irrespective of who's using them. We are facing serious problems with the affordability of housing. Housing is not about speculation, they're not about investment. That's where we differ. We think that young people deserve houses. We heard a lot today about whether ownership or rentals are more important. We discussed the vacancies tax. We talked about your positions. We talked about regulating the market or ensuring more freedom. But in Poland, we also have millions of apartments that already exist. I'm talking about the current housing stock, not the ones that are going to be built, but the ones that exist. One of the challenges ahead of us is the issue of energy poverty and adjusting housing stocks to new climate situations. So maybe we can have your opinion, your position on where Polish local authorities, and not just local authorities, where should they get the resources to combat energy poverty? Some European funds are not available at the moment, for example. Andrzej Domański. I will take the floor first. Let's get rid of the current government. Let's get rid of the current government because they are preventing us from getting 70 billion zlotys from the National Recovery Fund and the NRF could change the Polish economy. This money could also help in the thermal modernization of Polish houses and in the energy transition. The cheapest energy is the energy saved. So when you're asking about money, the answer is very simple. NRF and other EU funds. Because there is money, there are funds for energy efficiency, for the energy transition. Thank you. Well, you have to know how to make money. We should not criticize the people who have more than one apartment, more than one house. There are huge reserves of money that are linked to public-private partnership. I think we all know what PPP is. We are not talking about it much. Only independent journalists emphasize that this is an untapped resource in Poland. We are afraid that if we have private investors, when they get on the market, they will seek to make money at all costs, and there is more PPP everywhere in the world. We should trust people. We keep hearing about the abuse of power, so we should not be afraid of abuses by individuals. We should be afraid of abuses of power. So let's get educated. That is my recommendation. I learn from my lovely students. Your every question entails an answer. You have to listen to people. You should not reinvent the wheel. You should listen and consult everything. So PPP is your answer, right? Confederation is of the opinion that private partnerships, private public partnerships this is the opinion that me and my party have. I have read the Confederation program. You probably have not read it. I would like to discuss two things in the context. vacant apartments. We as the city and as the district, we are often accused that we're not tapping into this resource of vacant apartments. But you have different kinds of vacant, empty apartments. We don't like them. Some of these apartments are not available for legal reasons. Some are about to be auctioned. Others are in a very poor technical condition and you have to renovate them. So this magical number of 2 million vacant apartments has to be divided at least by half.
Ale to nie było za pani czasów, tylko zaprezentował wszystkiego, prezentował czasów.
I remember after the elections of 2018, one of the first projects that I run, based on an idea of local residents, we came up with a project for supporting people who are not connected to district heating. And they're using electricity to heat their houses and they're having to pay very high bills. This project was not approved by the city, and in my opinion, it was very much needed. Now, a very short story. Two elderly people come to me, they have cancer, a woman and a man, and they say, Mayor, we need to change our apartment quickly. We need a different standard of an apartment because we're ill and we're spending a lot on doctors, on medicines, and we need to change the place where we live. We were trying to help these people, but then we learned that we're not connected to district heating, and what kills us is electricity bills. That's why I came up with this project. We run some calculations of how much they would pay for district heating compared to paying for electricity. So these are examples of what we are doing. And where do you want to get this money? From the National Recovery Fund. It is something that we definitely need. I don't want to go into discussing international politics, but there will be a debate on national television, and I'm happy to discuss it then.
Okay, Adriana, can you tell us a secret? Our new home, it's a program. On the 15th, elections are coming up. What can we do if we get no EU funding? I didn't wave goodbye to EU funding yet, and I'm looking forward to them because we deserve them. And I assume that there will be money from the National Recovery Fund.
Ludziom dotrzeć do tych pieniędzy, bo będzie bardzo.
Because there will be many places where people will not be able to tap into funding earmarked to this goal. So at municipalities, there should be a person competent to fill in applications for homeowners, associations, individual homeowners. We can go back to this discussion in 2 weeks' time. If democratic opposition doesn't win, because I gather that if they win, we will get money from the National Recovery Fund. The capital city of Warsaw have introduced eco-advisors who are helping residents to swap from smoke belching furnaces to more environment-friendly heat sources. I'll be brief because I do agree with my colleagues who have rightly said that other countries are already using money
z ETS-ów, które mogły być w całości
from the National Recovery Fund, and they are reducing emission levels. Whereas the current government is not. But this is a topic for another energy dedicated debate. And about the system less prone to speculations. But since we have the system in place, all of those funds should be allocated to environmental protection and reducing our carbon footprint, including thermal upgrading of buildings. And I think the EU is heading in this direction. Paweł Lisiecki. I do agree with some statements that Poland deserves money from the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. And let me add, not all countries have used the available funding up to 50%. And you are presenting visions that all citizens will get money from the plan. It's not true. From 770 billion negotiated by our Prime Minister, roughly about 300 billion zlotys is allocated to energy efficiency. So it's not true that citizens, individual citizens, will be pocketing money from the fund, and everyone should know it. Coming back to ETS, on the website of the Ministry of Environment and Climate, you can read that Poland has tapped into those resources, for example, to make investments in solar panels, to buy a fleet of low emission buses, which are used in Warsaw. Funding was generated by emission trade. So where will we get funding from? So we will get a specific amount of money from the National Recovery Fund, and local government units will be providing funding as well. Are there any questions from the floor? Yes. I just wanted to tell you that the European strategy is the most valuable, a citizen-friendly European management strategy. Okay, so everyone was discussing it.
Pani Krystyno, pani Dorota się zgłaszała pierwsza, więc chciałabym, żebyśmy zachowali.
Dorota was first, so we need to keep the order. What? Okay, so where to get money from? We've discussed it, but we didn't say how to save the money. Okay, so Dorota raised her hand first. So let's agree on the order. Dorota, thank you. Okay, so very briefly, a comment on ETS. I've never said that the entire money is gone. It isn't. we are committed to spend 50% on the environment, so it's hardly surprising that we have zero-emission buses in Warsaw. And yes, we do agree that even if we are not committed by the EU, all funds should be allocated to such goals. Thank you. Okay, Krystyna. So we are not broadcasting. Is it not interesting anymore? Okay, so we are discussing where to get money from, and we have been presented many exciting ideas we've seen today. I just wanted to stress that we are not able to efficiently manage our country. There is the European strategy for citizen-friendly management, and all international research, all nationwide research findings indicate that projects that are co-created with citizens are much more robust and economic and efficient. And this is something that we are not doing because we are arguing with each other. So we should be working with citizens above political division. So should we introduce the language of love instead of hate speech to the parliament? You agree? Yes. The World Congress of Poles, we have had a number of very good ideas today, but you have mentioned the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. Are we ready for that? Because in terms of solar panels, I know that the grid in large city is not fit for such big number of installations. So one of my questions is, how will you get ready for funding from the plan? Because we will have to catch up on lots of things. Previously, we were discussing whether vacant flats should be taxed or not. And your idea, for example, we could split vacant flats into commercial and non-commercial ones. For example, when you are renting commercial premises, a guarantee fund could work if anything happens, like in the automotive industry. A similar solution could be applied. For example, 1% of rent could be allocated to the fund to keep you safe. Some premises are actually vacant, some are subject to litigation. So I would like to suggest some ideas for what can be done to prevent certain situations. You have mentioned a family which is behind with rent. Why they are not paying it? Perhaps we should focus on such individuals. They must have some talents. Adam Napalski, the World Congress of Poles. Okay, so I'll pick one question because you have asked numerous ones. Okay, so a question addressed to you, or perhaps you'd like to make a statement. Okay, the guarantee fund is an interesting option. Yes, a graduate of property management course. And I think we will be implementing this idea together because Polish universities are not ready for the new transformation. We need to educate students in many different ways. We have a mayor who is demonstrating all those qualities which need to be trained. I'm worried because I'm praised too much by Confederation. Okay, so anyone willing to answer my question? I think any tool that would stabilize relations between landlords and tenants should be taken into consideration. The devil is in the details. If we have legislation that may be discussed, I'm in. Okay, I'm lost because we have been touching on so many themes, but since I'm specializing in transitioning out of homelessness, I've said that not helping costs us a lot. A man sleeping on the bench in the park. Julia, who is with us today, she was trying to calculate how much it costs the society to have one homeless person. And I could present a number of paths that lead to homelessness, what was happening to people who became homeless, and what happens eventually when you are old. You end up in a care home and you need to pay approximately 2,000 euros a month for care. If we were able to help those people before it happened, costs would be reduced greatly. So these are health matters. It's a matter of mental health, housing, education, and there are many other factors that need to be improved so people do not become homeless. So please do remember about old people who will not be able to transition out of homelessness on their own. No one wants to be homeless. Perhaps the guarantee fund you have offered is a good idea. Sooner or later, the market is going to offer similar solutions, but perhaps the parliament could proceed and discuss this idea. And regarding people who are behind with rent, I do hope at least that some of them are not doing that on purpose, but they are people in need and they should be helped and treated differently than people who are not paying rent because they're not willing to do that or for reasons mentioned by the mayor. And people with problems, there are self-government units who should help them. Okay, I need to explain something. Initially, I have attacked Mr. Lisiecki, saying that Law and Justice has a pathetic housing plan. But I need to admit that I know no other member of the parliament who has such great insight into housing issues. He is familiar with each and every case, with each and every family. He knows cases in my district inside out, what is commendable. So I have to praise him. He's doing a sterling job. Well, it's good that you are finding a common language. And one more question, Jacek Kulikowski, the Polish Red Cross. And you might guess that I'll be asking you about humanitarian organizations. How do you want to collaborate with such organizations and housing projects, Dorota? Because I know that you wanted to answer the previous question. Okay, so let Krystyna's. let Christina speak. Thank you very much for this only important question, because we are now facing challenges which may even take us aback. The problem is we have very much needed Polish-Ukrainian projects. I've attended a meeting joined by an organization supporting Polish-German cooperation, an organization that was funded by Chancellor Kohl and the Prime Minister Mazowiecki to support political transformations. And after political changes, our German colleagues had no projects in the pipeline, and we were not able to go ahead with their implementation because we would face jail. So right now, together with humanitarian organizations, in collaboration with our German and Ukrainian counterparts, we need to start working on post-war reconstruction projects. Funding has been increased. We have funding available thanks to German and Ukrainian collaboration. But what have we done so far? I've said it yesterday, that together with parents of children with disabilities, we have built Poland's first home where children with disabilities will be living and where they will be rehabilitated. There was fire and most parents were faced with the dilemma, how can this home be reconstructed? So we asked charity organizations for a helping hand, and we had a fundraiser, and we have rebuilt this home. So thank you very much for focusing on this aspect by giving the floor to a very important organization. NGOs are the fourth power, which collaborating with NGOs translates into development. Okay, I encourage you. For example, the World Congress of Poles has a project in the pipeline that could truly transform Poland. Unfortunately, it has not been implemented. Okay, so I will go back to the previous question. It's one of the most simple tools. We believe that there should be a template of a tenancy contract that goes beyond the framework of this discussion. So we can come up with ideas for different tools. We can adapt the law that regulates rental, but what comes first is that many disputes could be solved faster if courts were working in a more efficient way. So this is the essence of the problem. Even the best tools are not going to work well if courts are not going to be efficient. Humanitarian organizations and NGOs in our vision, in our housing vision, play an important role. We would like to establish housing agency that would collaborate with municipalities and local government units to identify needs in a given municipality and the number of very much needed apartments from different price segments, and in cooperation with NGOs, which are specializing in the housing market, we could identify that. I think this is space for collaboration, and I think that would be very valuable. Okay, so regarding the last question, I think local government units will play a vital role. For example, we want to allocate 10 billion zlotys to refurbish flats, and later we could hand over those flats to you, so you can use it as sheltered housing, and the decision should be taken on the self-government level and not on the central Warsaw level, because representatives of local government units know needs best, and they know which NGOs are best in implementing different objectives. The civic coalition, the left and the third way, has met up has signed the declaration on development of the civic society, and you can read it if you want to find out more about it. I think NGOs have a major role to play on the housing market, and I think it's a topic for a separate panel. For example, people from Ukraine or from other countries also have very specific housing needs. Okay, I'm going to recap very briefly what is happening in what I find terrifying. We have put up containers, we have brought tens and hundreds of people from different countries to work there. This is what we've been fighting against, container towns. And there will be different problems popping up, and they should be mitigated now. Paweł Lisiecki. I just saw that the Polish Red Cross was subsidizing rental for foreign nationals. So I was thinking perhaps this program should be expanded. It should not only include refugees, but also people in the crisis of homelessness. And you could outreach those people who are in most need of a home. And we could subsidize rental for them. I think this would be the simplest and the most effective solution.
It's been exactly 2 hours. But some panelists might have to leave us. That's what we agreed. 2 hours. A very quick question. Julia Wygnańska, Mieszkanie Polska. I represent an NGO. I deal with people who've suffered from homelessness. Which parties, well, there will be parties in power, there will be parties in the opposition. What can you declare? What can you promise to do to implement a shared program, thanks to which at least people who are sleeping rough or sleeping in shelters, there are not that many people suffering from long-term unemployment. To what extent can you reach consensus to address this problem, to come up with a solution? Thanks to this cooperation between different parties. I'm not talking about Finland, but also in Ireland. There have been agreements reached at national level, This was about cooperation between governments and local governments and NGO, and as a result, they addressed the problem of long-term homelessness. Very briefly. A very important topic, and I'm to be concise. Thank you very much for this request. And I think that we can only do it if we agree to work and not to hamper the work, because we are seeing obstacles. So basically, we need to work together and not to hamper efforts leading to improvement.
Podziękowaliśmy burmistrzowi za to, że prowadzi piękną wymianę młodzieży, ale żeby jednocześnie był tak miły i nie przeszkadzał również w robieniu pięknych Polaków przy współpracy z Polakami z zagranicy. I pomogło. I dlatego na każdym kroku.
So basically, I keep saying that we need to work together. We need to try to agree. We need to try to reach consensus.
Mowę nienawiści, a dzisiaj chyba tej mowy było trochę mniej, prawda? I spróbujmy się tak trzymać. Dziękuję bardzo.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Ja może bardzo.
Very briefly, the availability of homes should increase. We need to address the issue of homelessness. I can't tell you that I'm an expert. We were supposed to talk about policy for the housing market, but I'm deeply convinced that with our colleagues as the Civic Coalition, we will do our utmost to address the problem of homelessness in Poland. I cannot be specific, but we will support every project that makes sense to support the development of housing in Poland. Government programs, local government programs, and physical, natural persons. Julia Wygnańska talked about a very specific program, apartment first, najpierw mieszkanie. This is a very specific program addressing the needs of a very specific group of people. On behalf of Third Way, I declare that we will be happy to talk about what we need to do.
Okej, ja teraz trochę tutaj rozumiem, bo myślałam, że to było pytanie o to, czy jesteśmy w stanie, niezależnie od tego, która strona wygra, usiąść do stołu.
I thought this was a question about a general consensus about the need to address homelessness. As Andrzej Domański, who represents the Civic Coalition, I think I can promise that we will be happy to sit down and reach consensus on the problem of homelessness. We will first develop and then support solutions to combat homelessness, and we will benefit from the experience of NGOs and experts in this field, as Adriana Porowska said. I'm deeply convinced that irrespective of who wins, we can sit down and work together with other parties to develop a minimum, irrespective of our dream programs. I hope that we can strike a compromise on this issue, reach consensus, and do something. I hope that NGOs can be a mediator in this process. It's just a question of whether all political forces will be willing to cooperate on this.
Proszę Państwa.
Problem bezdomności.
Well, the problem of homelessness is not only a problem of lack of social or community housing. It's a very complex issue. You need to work with those people. Flat will not fix the problem, but I do agree with my colleague from the left that there is will to sit down and discuss this issue after the elections. So we have very specific pledges at the very end. And I would like to thank you for those 2 hours spent together, and probably and 2 days spent together during the Housing Forum. Our guests were Andrzej Domański of Civic Coalition, Paweł Lisiecki of Law and Justice, Dorota Olgo, the left, Dariusz Kasprzak, local governments, Adrianna Porowska, Third Way, and Krystyna Krzakotowska, Confederation.
Zapraszam do rozmów w kuluarach.
Okay, so right now it's networking time, and thank you very much. I would like to thank all the speakers. I would like to thank you, people who are joining us live and those who have tuned in online. I do know that 2 days dedicated to housing. Well, for some of you, this is the part and parcel of your life. For some of you, it was a novel experience.
Habitat for Humanity.
At Habitat for Humanity, we believe that this topic brings us all together and that the home is just a step forward. It's not the end. In a while, we are going to invite you to upcoming events. I would like to thank all patrons of our forum. Our partners included UNHCR,
Agencja Narodów Zjednoczonych,
the Institute for Development of Cities and Regions, the Center of Revitalization Center, and the Political Observatory. Our media patrons included a number of publications. I would like to thank you for taking part in our forum. I would like to thank UNHCR. I would like to thank the moderator of our last session. And I'm leaving you with one sentence: a housing policy which is above political divisions, which is long-term, and responds to housing challenges to ensure that everyone has a decent place to live. And discussions we've had today and yesterday will be continued at Europe Housing Day, held in Brussels in the middle of November. We would like to invite you to the next edition of the Housing Forum, combined with the European Housing Forum based in Warsaw. So I hope to see each other next year and see you soon.